Hello, all, and welcome back to another edition of Big Guy Fantasy Sports Fantasy Football Consistency Show. It is playoff time! Woo! We are so excited. I hope everybody else, just like you guys, everybody else out there like us, got into some playoffs. Hopefully, as many as possible. When you play in as many leagues as I do, and I know Ron plays in quite a few as well, it can be overwhelming, and you're like, how many did I get in? And you start counting here. But anyway, we're excited to be here again this week as we head into the fantasy playoffs. The only leagues that wouldn't be doing fantasy playoffs are people that have touchdown only leagues and only have 4 teams make the playoffs, so they only do 16 and 17. So that's me. Because I thought the playoffs were going to start this week, and my buddy and I were talking about it on our trip, and so him and I both made it in. At least we thought for sure we were both in. And then I forgot we had one more week of regular season, but we actually are both in because the playoff spots are already set because everybody who's in a playoff position is 2 games ahead of the person below them. So this week doesn't matter. So that's the only league you're probably not having in. But most who have at least 6 in the playoffs or whatever you do, definitely are starting this week. You might have some buys, so good for you if you do, especially if you have some of these injured players who are sitting out this week. That might be saving you in some leagues, which I know it is for Ron and I. So, of course, as always, I'm Bob Lung here, Big Guy Fantasy Sports, and always on this side of me is Ron Rigney, coming to me live from Florida. He's wearing the sweatshirt. I have the short sleeve shirt on. Go figure. Of course, I have palm trees in the backfield, so in the back behind me. So, Ron, what's going on, brother? What is it, 60 down there? You guys are putting sweatshirts on?
I'm telling you, brutal. It was only in the high 50s the last couple mornings, so we're about to freeze up down here. So yeah, playoff time. You notice I put I changed the Jim Mora playoffs for the playoffs because I made a couple, but the only problem with what you said was this year for some reason didn't really take me all that long to count up those playoff teams. I don't know what happened. It was one of those years. I'm proud of the ones I got, man, because a couple of them were a struggle, a couple of them were squeakers I got in, but we're going to come up with some guys that you can get because, man, this quarterback position is ugly. We talk about it being inconsistent, but boy, it's getting swallowed up by injuries, including, a lot of these guys you picked up off waivers. So I got CJ Stroud, I got Justin Herbert. Not a great scenario for a lot of these playoff quarterbacks. It's not the right time to be looking for a quarterback, that's for sure.
No, that's for sure. I was at my nonprofit board meeting the other night, and 2 of the people, one female, one male, both play fantasy. We were talking about who made the playoffs and that. And the female said to me, "Yeah," she goes, "I made the playoffs." She goes, "I'm not sure how because I didn't think my team was that good, and I drafted it." I said, "Did they stay healthy all year?" She goes, "Yeah, actually, surprisingly, they did." I said, "That's why you're in the playoffs."
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I said, and maybe you'll, win the whole thing. I said, there are going to be some ugly teams winning titles this year. Because, you're starting the Zach Wilsons, Joe Flacco's, Desmond. Who knows who you're pulling up? As you mentioned, I have Justin Herbert, so many leagues. And so the ones I didn't make the playoffs in, I'm struggling now to find, just reach in a hat of names and just pull one out and hope that that guy has 20 points. That's all I ask. Just give me 20 points for the 2 weeks and the semifinals and the finals, or all 3 weeks. That's all I need. Just get me through. Give me 20 points. You don't have to have 40. You don't have to. Just don't have 5 or 10 or 12 or like Justin Herbert last week, 2.8, and just destroy my chances.
Or CJ Stroud 3.64, I think is what he had for me in Kings Classic.
Yeah.
So.
Imagine being in a 2 quarterback league and you're like, I got Herbert and Stroud, and you're just waltzing towards the playoffs, and all of a sudden your 2 players combine for 7 points and you're pretty much done. But yeah, it's been ugly. So, all right, well, let's get started here as we always do with the quarterback position. At the top of the list at 100% consistent is Joe Flacco. Okay, he's only 2 games, but he is 100%. But the regular guys, top of the list, Jalen Hurts failed against the Cowboys. In fact, he got his ass kicked. Let's just be honest. So he's down, tied 85% with Sam Howell. Sam Howell's now tied for first place. He could win the quarterback consistency award this year. Wouldn't that be awesome? Josh Allen, 77%. Kyler Murray at 75%, as well as, of course, Kirk Cousins. Brock Purdy, 69%, dropped down 1. Justin Fields, 67. Dak Prescott, 62. Actually, quite a few at 62. I'll just read the list. Prescott, C.J. Stroud, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, and Russell Wilson is now tied with all of that group. I really feel like next year there will be no high quarterbacks picked. I don't think you're going to see the Josh Allens and Jalen Hurts and those guys going in the first and second round like we did this year. And if you do, then it's your fault. But maybe Jalen Hurts, maybe. But it's been tough for the quarterback position. Ron, every week we look at this and kind of shake our heads. I think the quarterbacks are getting close to being the same as at least the tight ends. I don't think we can. They might be getting closer to the tight ends. I think, or maybe they're with the catchers now. Maybe they could even be below that. I'm starting to think that we might embarrass them. We might have to apologize to the catchers for the second time this year after we compared them to tight ends earlier. But this is a messy, messy situation. I don't know how anybody goes into any of these games in the playoffs and expects that their quarterback's going to go off. I mean, we all thought that was going to happen Monday night with Tua against Tennessee, and that did not happen. So your thoughts, and who do you got for your quarterback that you're looking at going forward here?
Well, like we were talking about last week, these yardage totals seem to be way, way down across the league. So if your guys aren't getting those touchdowns, i.e. Jalen Hurts last week, if he's not doing it with his legs and he's not doing it, getting in the end zone through it with that arm, he's not getting you those points. And I have him in a 2 QB league and didn't get it done for me last week. Luckily, I still won. But yeah, it's just, it's the opposite of what we do here. It's not consistent at all. And so you're looking at a lot of inconsistent options here for your first round of your playoffs. But the guy I'm going to focus on, probably you look up inconsistency, you're going to probably find him in the dictionary, and that's Desmond Ridder. And it's one of these things that we talk about all these weapons they have. We talk about Kyle Pitts, we talk about Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and finally, for some reason, looks like he found that he has both Drake London and Kyle Pitts, and last week went for 347 against Tampa. Yeah, and you're going to have to start guys like this. Like you were saying, you've got Joe Flacco, you've got, Jake Browning, you've got Desmond Ridder, you've got all these backups that are suddenly thrust back into jobs and getting it done. Like you said, Joe Flacco is 2 for 2, but I like Desmond Ridder coming up. Here again, Drake London is a beast. If they can consistently get him the ball, we saw that last week. But, you saw Ridder go off for 347. As long as he's not turning the ball over. He had a nice stretch there in the middle of the season, 3 games with no picks. Had a few weeks ago, only had 1 last week. If he only throws the 1 and gets you a touchdown, you can live with it. But next week against Carolina, we know Carolina's terrible at anything related to football. And then he gets those Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week, which if you were listening to Consistently Cashing, our guy Colby R. Conway was talking about how bad the Bucs are on that outside, and Desmond Ridder exploited that. So if you can add Desmond Ridder, run and do that right now for these. If you need a first rounder and a second rounder, because he's got a couple of nice weeks coming up, and it looks like they're finally going to try to let it loose and get it to those guys that they've got on that offense.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, the Buccaneers' pass defense is just putrid right now. And so if you are looking to pick up a quarterback, see who the Bucs are playing, which I think is Green Bay. So Jordan Love probably isn't out there, but you never know. Hasn't been certainly setting the world on fire, but Jordan Love is with the group at 62%. So who are we to judge? And by the way, I forgot to mention that Tua is at 54%. For those of you that drafted him way too high. The guy I'm going to talk about is my Cleveland Brown boy, and I think he's close to the same age as me, and that's Joe Flacco. Joe's 2 straight weeks walks in, sit on the couch going, I should try to piss off these Baltimore Ravens fans and go play for the Browns for a few games. So he got off the couch and showed up 2 weeks ago, week 13, 19.7 fantasy points, which does get him over the clutch limit. It's still below 19. It's 18.8. Had a nice game against a good defense. I mean, they're ranked in the top 10 against quarterbacks, fantasy points. This past week played against a bad defense in the Jacksonville Jaguars and given up lots of fantasy points to quarterbacks, and they did to Joe Flacco. 3 touchdown passes, 337 yards, 25.45 fantasy points. And this week he gets the Chicago Bears again at home. So I could see some similar numbers. I don't know if it'd be 311, but the weather's supposed to be decent this weekend. It's actually supposed to be in the 40s and 50s. So it's actually been, sunny and like mid 40s to low 50s for the last few days. And I think it's supposed to last through the weekend. So weather doesn't look at this point too bad. At worst, it'll rain. definitely no snow or anything super cold. So definitely keep an eye on that for this weekend. But yeah, Joe Flacco is my boy because, again, it's closer to my age. Let's look at the running back positions. We just have to talk about it, as always. Christian McCaffrey, top of the list. I think he's now 85 points ahead of second place. And of course, 13 for 13, 100%. All the buys are done, so everybody should have the same amount of games if they played them all, which is 13. Alvin Kamara, sixth place with 3 less games, but 10 for 10, perfectly 100%. Going down the list at 90%, David Montgomery. Jonathan Taylor's at 86, but he's out. Raheem Mostert, still second in total points, 85%, tied with Bijan Robinson. Kyron Williams at 78%. At 77, we have Travis Etienne, Rachaad White, Joe Mixon, Breece Hall, and Jerome Ford. And then, yeah, it's all Joe Mixon. I don't know if I remember saying him. All at 77%. 75 is Achin. Nope, my apologies. 71%. 5 is 7. 70% is Austin Eckler. Everybody else is below 70. Running backs, most of the guys are up there. I mean, I guess if I see anything different than what we had in the past is the rookies are, you don't ignore them anymore, especially the ones that get the opportunities and get the main thing. I mean, we all talked about guys like Bijan Robinson. Well, I shouldn't say rookies. I mean, Bijan was a rookie, but the guys that kind of stepped up into new roles. So Rachaad White, Breece Hall, Mostert, Kyron Williams, these kind of guys stepped into the roles, took them, and pun intended, have ran with it. So they've been looking pretty good. Ron, talk to me about, guys that you see in the list, or maybe even a little bit lower, maybe who've been disappointing from a numbers and consistency standpoint. And then let's talk about the guy that you kind of like going forward this week.
Well, of course, I'm going to point out my guy, Kyron Williams, and it just goes to show you, when you get those picks later in that draft, go after those backup running backs or maybe even some of those third stringers, because it never fails every year. I think the best work I've done in leagues is when I've had to scrape for running backs and use those late round guys. But like you said, a lot of those guys stepping up in those roles. Rachaad White, you talked about him, 8 straight clutch games at this point. I feel like we talk about him every single week. Dude has turned it on and been electric. Devin Achane, you mentioned him, might not be there this week, so keep an eye on that if you got him. But the guy I want to focus on, guy that, here again, Miles Sanders was the big flashy offseason acquisition for the Carolina Panthers, and we see how that's gone. Not too well. Sanders had some success in Philly. I think it's more of a product of that offense as we're kind of seeing here. But Chuba Hubbard has been the guy, and I don't have too many shares of Chuba Hubbard. I wish I did. But when I dove into his stats, didn't realize last couple of weeks, 20-plus carries. So that kind of tells you, like Bob, you made a good point off air. Miles Sanders has kind of been pushed to the side by the new regime, and they want to see what they have with Chuba Hubbard, and he's answering that bell for sure. 23 for 87 last week, 25 for 104 the week before that. So I like to see him a little bit more involved in the passing game, but we know that passing game with the quarterback there, the young guy Bryce Young, it's an absolute mess unless you're Adam Thielen. So probably won't get a whole lot of receptions out of him. He's only had a couple games where he's had over 5 targets, but the carries are going to be there, and even he's getting those 20-plus carries. That you don't really need those receptions. Now, the bad thing about it is they're so bad on offense, they get behind. Game script might call for them to throw it a little bit more, so we'll see what happens there. Maybe he'll get enough touches to make it worth your while. But if he can get you in the end zone, like he did a couple weeks ago against Tampa, has middle-of-the-road matchup coming up this week against Atlanta, but the one after that is Green Bay. Green Bay is actually in the bottom third. They are 9th worst as far as allowing fantasy points to running backs. So you got Chuba Hubbard. You got found money there. He's another one of those late round guys that you're probably counting on in this first week of the playoffs, especially if you got a shaky quarterback situation.
Yeah, no question about it. The guy I'm just going to bring up. I know he's starting on everybody's team out there, and I totally understand that. But it's that time of the year, folks. No, it's not the holidays. It's Derrick Henry versus the Houston Texans rush defense. This week. Interestingly enough, he plays them like twice out of the last 3 weeks, or last 4 or 5 weeks here. But this week will be week 1 for him. Let me see when his other one is. So he's got Houston. Yeah. So then 2 weeks later, he'll play at Houston. So if you save Derrick Henry for your playoff time, congratulations. But this week is the week. So make sure you get him in, even if I know there's been talk like, oh, well, Tajon Spears is getting opportunities, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he is, because they want to keep him fresh because they know Houston's coming. So after he ran pretty much pretty well, and scored some touchdowns against Miami this past week, going up against the Houston Texans at home in Tennessee. So definitely make sure you get him in your lineup if you have him on your team. So as we move into the wide receiver position, and as we all know, this is what's holding all of our fantasy teams together. And for those of you who've had Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, you've been struggling between quarterbacks going down and injuries themselves. Looks like I went to the Raiders-Vikings game, and thank you for all your sympathy cards that you sent me. It was as bad, if not worse, than what they talked about. So it was the lowest scoring indoor football game in the history of the NFL, and it wasn't that good. So I will tell you now, you were glad you missed it.
Spoiler alert, it doesn't sound like it was that good.
No, it was not. It's a fun place to go watch a football game. Go to the Super Bowl. It'll be a lot more fun. Anyways, but yeah, so I watched my boy Justin Jefferson. Kind of was hoping he would come back, would look good. He had like 2 or 3 catches fairly early in the first quarter. I'm like, all right, here we go. And then our good friend, the Pasternaut, decided to air one out, pun intended. And he stretched out poor JJ, and he got crushed right in the side. He went down. They called it a chest injury. I think it was more ribs, but Big took himself out and didn't come back. Again, who am I to judge? I couldn't take the hit either, but I'm 60. Plus, I wouldn't have jumped that high. It would have been over my head. So it would have been non-catch for me. So it'd been fine. I maybe got a penalty for interference if somebody hit me. But anyway, so he did not do well. It was a bad game. But as we look at these wide receivers, we have one perfect left, and that is Mr. Tyreek Hill, still crushing it out there. Didn't have as great as week as he's had in most weeks, but still had a solid week going in and out of the injury tent there on Monday night. CeeDee Lamb, man, I think Ron said this last week. There's nobody hotter than CeeDee Lamb, and yeah, he is correct. Keenan Allen, but of course Keenan's out this week, so if you see this before the game, which will be too late. It is too late, but he's out today. But tied at 92% with Keenan, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Michael Pittman at 92%, A.J. Brown at 85%. The only guy that I can proudly say I was all over at the beginning of the season and has actually come through for me and not get injured, knock on wood or anything else. Cortland Sutton also at 85%, DK Metcalf, Stephon Diggs at 83%. DJ Moore, this is 77. DJ Moore, Mike Evans, Chris Olave, and Jordan Addison, 75%. Jalen Waddle, 73%. Deebo Samuel, that's all over 70. A lot of wide receivers between 60 and 69. All very good ones. A lot of the main stars are there. But, the number one consensus pick in Justin Jefferson didn't hold up. In fact, I forget, one of the big boys, I don't know if it was Mike Clay, Marcus Grant, I don't remember who it was, but, put up the curse of the number one, the 101 over the last 5 years and how they've all been hurt or underperformed. And yeah, this one did it again this year. In fact, next year, I think if somebody says, hey, we're going to draw cards for the pick, I'm going to if I get first pick, I don't want it. I don't want to take it. Or I'm just going to take somebody that nobody would take at 101, like, Jamar Chase or, maybe A.J. Brown. I don't know. But I am not taking
maybe CeeDee Lamb.
The consensus next year is going to go back to CMC. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, right. So, damn well, as soon as you draft him as your 101, he's going to get hurt in week 2 and be out for the season. He certainly looked good the last, year or two, but just too risky. But anyway, so that's most of the wide receiver position, the top of the wide receiver position. Ron, your thoughts? Again, there's a lot of guys who are not in the 70 and above percentage, which, injuries mostly, but injuries to quarterbacks have hurt a lot of these guys as well. It's not injuries to them per se, like Jefferson. I mean, Jamar Chase has played every game just about, if I'm not mistaken. And yet, he's 62%, 8 out of 13 because, well, Burrow hasn't played for 5 weeks now. So your thoughts, and who do you got for your guy that you like to talk about?
Yeah, we talk about this every year, especially towards the end of the season. What are you looking at as far as your draft strategy for next year? What are you taking in the first round? And I think it always comes back to when you look at receiver. You look at this consistency model that we have, and when you look at this position, I know there's a lot of guys that play it, but there are way more guys that are over 60, over 70% than there are at other positions. So that kind of tells you right there. A great example is I have in the FanX auction league, I went 12-2. I don't think I've ever gone 12-2.
Fine.
12-2 in 20 years of playing fantasy football. But receivers are Tyreek, Brandon Ayuk, DJ Moore, my top three, and it helps to have Christian McCaffrey and CJ Stroud as well. But that's the core of my team. If I didn't have those three guys, especially Tyreek Hill sitting at number one, I wouldn't be. Well, I guess I have the number one at both positions, running back and receiver, so that kind of helps. But I wouldn't be doing that if I didn't have Tyreek and if I didn't have those other two guys supporting as well. So it makes a huge difference. I think that's where you got to go, unless you feel bold and you feel like Travis Kelce, if he comes back, is still that number one pick, which I don't know that I would do that again this year. But the guy I'm going to look at, I'm going to stick on that Falcons bandwagon. I went with Desmond Ridder, and as Desmond Ridder goes, so goes Drake London. And we know that Drake London coming out of USC had the size, was just a beast. And we know that Desmond Ridder is anything but consistent for all the reasons that I told you before. But if they are going to get that passing game going, it's got to go through Drake London. He's got to be the number one guy. They're for some reason not making Kyle Pitts the focal point. But last week, Drake London, 10 for $172. He's only been in the end zone twice, so the scoring I don't think is going to be there. But here again, it's a guy that you already have, but it's a guy that's got a couple of good matchups coming up. They've got Carolina coming up this following week, as I said, and then they go to Indy, which you can throw on Indy as well. But targets are going to be there as long as Desmond Ridder's in there, and it's a secondary that has any shaky pieces in it. He's got a couple of games with double-digit targets. A couple of weeks at the Jets, they'll win for a catch for 8 yards. So they don't have any defenses like that coming up because those Jets, we know Sauce Gardner's going to lock you down. But 5 for 91 the week before that against Washington last in October, 9 for $125. So those targets are going to be there. Those yardage totals are going to be there. And if he gets you a touchdown, that's just kind of that cherry on that Sunday for Drake London.
Yeah, like I said, Drake crushed me in the Kings Classic snake division because I was playing against him, and most of the guys' team I played against really didn't score that many points, but he had Drake London and one other person that had a huge week, maybe DJ Moore, and my team, had Herbert who went down, Jefferson went down, Chase scored 6 points, something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't much.
AJ had quite a bit, but yeah, most of my team just did not pull through. Zach Moss didn't do anything, hasn't for a few weeks. He's killing me. So it was ugly, but needless to say, like I said, backed into the playoffs there. The guy I'm going to go with is DeAndre Hopkins. Just kind of want to remind people that he's not dead. He still looked good. In the last 2 games, he's actually looked very good. He had that huge week when Levis came in the middle of the game or early in the game. He threw 3 touchdowns to DeAndre Hopkins, and man, everybody just went, batshit crazy over Levis and thought him and Hopkins were just going to tear it up. Well, then 3 out of the last 4 weeks after that, he only had 4 catches 3 and 4 and 3. Never got over 60 yards in receiving. So a lot of us were kind of like, all right, this isn't going to fly. So, I only had him in one league, which is actually my touchdown only league. So I did bench him there. Last week he scored a touchdown. I'm like, okay, he's playing against Miami. Should be a shootout, which it ended up kind of being. And Hopkins came through with 7 catches, 124 yards, but most importantly, got me a touchdown. So definitely keeping him in this week for that. But just want to remind people, he's 19th in total points, 62% consistent, which not great, but hell, he's tied with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson is a 67, so not that far behind. So definitely keep Hopkins in your lineup. Don't give up on him yet. He might help you through the playoffs. Like I said, they're playing Tennessee this week, playing Houston this week. It was a little bit better against the pass and the run, but either way, they're going to have to mix up a little bit. They can't run Derrick Henry 30 times. They might try, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. But All right, let's move into our favorite position, the tight end position. We have a tie now at 92%. Travis Kelce, TJ Hockenson battling it out for the always coveted Fantasy Football Consistency Award as the top tight end. And it doesn't get any tighter than this. As I mentioned, 92%, both Kelce and Hockenson. Do you know what the point difference between the two is? 1 point. No, it's not even 1. It is 0.70. So 198.6 to 197.9. They're battling it out. Of course, Kelce played one less game because he missed the first one of the year. But needless to say, these two are pretty much run away with the title. We might have to just give away co-winners on that one. Evan Ingram, 77%. Mark Andrews, of course, out the rest of the year, 70%. That won't change. Sam Laporte is 69%. Actually, one of his rare non-clutch games this past week. So at 62%, we've got George Kittle, Cole Kmet, David Njoku, who had a big week with Mr. Flacco this past week, and Jake Ferguson also at 62%. And that's it. Everybody else below 60. Most of them are either falling apart or just haven't got there. But Ron, you do have one of those guys you want to talk about who has not had a bad year, 6th in total points so far, and one of those 62% consistent. So tell us all about it, and also your thoughts on wide receivers tight ends without throwing up.
You know, there's not much left that can be said about this position. And the guy I'm going to talk about is a 62% consistency. And if you're getting 62% consistency from your tight end, you're almost a world beater at this point with what we got there. And if you have to go to waivers and get a tight end, my heart goes out to you, because there is absolutely nothing out there. If it's over 10 teams, you're not going to find anything. But I want to focus on Cole Kmet. You know, being from Indiana, you tend to root for Notre Dame just because Notre Dame is Notre Dame. Cole Kmet's a Notre Dame guy, so he's one of my favorite players. But dude's got it done. You know, you pointed it out, and it all hinges on Justin Fields being in there. Justin Fields may not be consistent, but the guy can do it with his legs. The guy can make plays. He can extend plays, and that benefits Cole Kmet. They've kind of built that rapport. Likes to look for him in the red zone as well. Cole Kmet with 5 touchdowns on the year, 61 grabs, 548 yards. And when you go down that target list, ever since that October 29th game against the Chargers, 10 targets, 8 targets, 7 targets, 7-6. He's only got one game that's below 6, so he's getting all the looks there. Justin Fields is looking for his number. 7 grabs for 43 yards a couple weeks ago. If you're getting 7 for 43 from your tight end this year, you're getting a clutch game 10 times out of 10. 5 for 66 last week, so he's not putting up huge numbers. I don't think there's too many tight ends that are, and he's getting you a touchdown every so often. A little bit of tough sledding coming up. Got the Browns. We know that defense is absolutely just lights out. But like I said, with Justin Fields and his ability to be able to extend plays, there's always a shot for anybody, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet in that offense, to put up some big numbers. So if you need a guy, might be a guy that could be out there in shallow leagues, could be a guy you have on your bench, might be a guy that you're counting on because of injury as well. But I love me some Cole Kmet.
Yeah, like you said, 62%, it's nothing to sneeze at. And he, like you said, he's 6th in total points. So I think last year he might have been at least top 12 tight end in points. Didn't have the consistency as much. But, yeah, I mean, he's better than most of these other ones can be. And I'll talk about one who was drafted probably many, many rounds ahead of him, and that's Kyle Pitts. And we haven't bragged about Kyle Pitts too much because, well, they haven't thrown him the ball that much. As you mentioned, though, the Falcons definitely had a great week this past week against Tampa Bay, because everybody has. So not only did Drake London benefit, so did Kyle Pitts with his 2nd touchdown of the year. So only 3 catches, 57 yards, which actually would have put him over a clutch game. But he got the extra touchdown, so 14.7, which means he was probably 2nd or 3rd overall in points for the week. But, yeah, he's, again, at least getting him the ball now. Ritter's been playing better, certainly has that option. And this week, Atlanta is playing against San Francisco, so he's going to need to get rid of that ball quickly. And so Kyle Pitts might be the right option for that, or some quick slants to Drake, as in London. So Ron, to everybody where they can find you this week, I know you guys crushed it on the DFS side, and we actually went well. So Colby made the picks. I didn't get a chance to do them because I went out of town. But Colby went 2-1, so we're 60 and 38. So still doing pretty good. So everybody there, they can find you.
BigGuyFantasySports.com, at Ron Rigney on the X Machine. Go check out everybody we've got over at BigGuyFantasySports.com. Stuff coming out constantly. Of course, this consistency show. We actually won you some GPP money last week. If you threw that bad boy into GPP, we did pretty good. You talked about a couple guys on here that went off. Drake London was one of those guys that went off for us. So check that out. Check out the prop bets. And last but not least, went real basic here, but I went with a guy that is an absolute dude, fun to watch, and that's Mike Evans. Went with little Mike Evans 2013 Topps football rookie card here. So that's your random football of the week.
Wow. 2013 was his rookie season.
Right?
Seems like yesterday, but it hasn't, has it? That's 11 years.
And the dude gets it done every year. Surefire Hall of Famer.
Amazing.
Just consistent.
And I don't know if you remember, I think we've been together long enough that we hated Mike Evans in the first 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
He was Mr. Inconsistency. We used to just bitch about him every year about people drafting him way too high, and then literally has flip-flopped that. Now he's one of the Mr. Consistencies out there. So definitely great stuff. All right. As always, find me on Big Guy Fantasy Sports. Of course, this podcast, I will be back live with Colby so we can get back and continue the winning ways that Colby left with in Colby's hands. He did great. Took 2 out of 3 there. So we'll get back to you guys Saturday morning. Of course, those guys crushed it with the DFS. And of course, was I smart enough, or did I take the time to put that lineup into my thing? Of course not, because I was excited about going to Vegas to watch the historic football game, worst ever. So lost out on some money because I always put them into both a cash game and a GPP. So maybe I would have won some decent cash. Maybe I would have won my gambling back. Probably not. But for Ron Rigney, I'm Bob Lung. Everybody have a great week. Take care. We will see you soon. God bless.